Annunciation Radio presents Say Yes to Life with Peter Range, Senior Fellow for Strategic Initiatives at the Center for Christian Virtue.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Say Yes to Life, where we learn to embrace our Catholic faith in the secular world. I'm your host, Peter Range, Senior Fellow for the Center for Christian Virtue, and welcome to show number 455 as we continue the fight for every single human life, born, preborn, and yours in our world today. On today's show, I'm tremendously excited to welcome a friend, Troy McIntosh, and a new friend, Dave O'Rourke. Troy McIntosh is the director of CCV's Ohio Christian Education Network, or OCEAN. Troy came to OCEAN after serving 27 years in Christian education as a teacher, principal, and for his last 8 years as head of school at Worthington Christian School in Worthington, Ohio. Prior to his time in education, he worked in the Ohio House of Representatives in the Legislative Services Commission Fellowship Program. Dave O'Rourke graduated from Huntington College with a degree in theater performance. He and his wife moved to Columbus when he was hired by Columbus Children's Theater in 2001. Since then, he has worked as a theater teacher, directing nearly 100 shows and camp performances. Dave and his wife have 4 kids from 14 to 22, and he and his wife run a homeschool co-op for his kids who struggle to achieve their potential in a typical classroom. Troy, David, and I are going to be talking about the prime principle of all Catholic social teaching and Christian doctrine, which is human dignity. Each of us made in the image and likeness of God. In particular, Troy and David will discuss a new school which is opening up called Imago Christian School, and I can't wait for you to hear about it. But first, let's go ahead and take 180 seconds around Ohio and the nation to talk about what's happening in the pro-life movement and the news. First, Health and Human Services with an important move. Just today, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. signed a declaration stating that, quote, sex-rejecting procedures, end quote, are neither safe nor effective treatments for children with gender dysphoria. The declaration is part of a series of actions aimed at stopping minors from harming themselves through sex change procedures. Now, key aspects of this announcement include Medicare and Medicaid funding. The proposed rules would prohibit hospitals and providers that offer gender-affirming care for minors from receiving reimbursement from Medicare or Medicaid for any type of medical visit. This would affect almost every hospital in the United States. So as much as we'd like to see more progress from HHS on the abortion pill, at least we're seeing some action here against the transgender madness. All right, secondly, out of Pennsylvania, they're in need of our prayers here, folks. Yesterday, the Pennsylvania State House passed a measure for abortions basically up to birth by one vote. Not only would it allow abortions on demand throughout pregnancy, it would force Pennsylvania residents to fund abortions as well. House Bill 1957 is a highly regressive form of legislation which would wipe out protections against taxpayer funding of abortion at a time when the vast majority of taxpayers do not want their hard-earned money to pay for abortion, said Maria Gallagher, executive director of the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation, the Keystone States affiliate of the National Right to Life. The bill now moves to the Pennsylvania Senate for consideration. If you live in Pennsylvania, please call your state senator and urge him or her to oppose HB 1957. All right, third, New York, unfortunately, inching closer to assisted suicide. New York Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul has said that in January, after some minor changes are added, she will sign a bill legalizing assisted suicide in her state. Hochul said the new amendment bill for the bill would include additional safeguards or guardrails to protect family members, caregivers, and doctors and ensure that vulnerable populations are not pressured or misled. Of course, these guardrail protections, such as they are, will come under sustained assault once the law goes into effect as barriers to a good death. They are unlikely to last for very long. Just look at Oregon, for example, where those barriers quickly fell, or Canada. So from the beginning of life to the end, we've lost the sense that every single human life has worth, has value, is made in God's image and likeness. And on today's show, we have 2 men that believe in that principle. And so I'm excited to welcome now them both for this main conversation. That again is Troy McIntosh, director of CCV's Ohio Christian Education Network, and David O'Rourke, who is a theater teacher, runs a homeschooling co-op, and is on the ground floor for a new exciting school called Imago Christian School in Columbus, Ohio. Troy, David, welcome to CS to Life.
Peter, thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, gentlemen, I wonder if we could just kind of begin with your stories. Troy, let's start with you. Where did you grow up? What got you into education? And how did you eventually land at the Center for Christian Virtue?
Wow, what a question. Yeah, I grew up in Northeast Ohio in Canton, and graduated high school and went away to college with never the intention of getting an education. That would have been at the bottom of the list of things that I would have gotten into when I went away to college. Um, but I went away. I went to a public high school, went to a Christian and evangelical college in Illinois. And that completely changed my life because for the first time, I began to see how my faith and my learning connected with each other. And so it completely alivened both of them. For the first time, I began to see I was growing in my faith because all of these things that I was learning began to speak to that. And then my faith was speaking to those things that I was learning. And it completely revolutionized the way I thought about life. And so that began to show me the importance and value of Christian education. And so I graduated with an economics degree and began working in state government. But that pull toward education continued. And so I ended up leaving government and went back to grad school at Ohio State and finished a master's degree there and ended up teaching at Worthington Christian. And I ended up being there for 27 years in a variety of roles. And then about 4 years ago, God called me into a new position here at the Ohio Christian Education Network and saw the value and worth of being able to help Christian schools grow throughout Ohio. And that's been a real satisfying endeavor.
Yeah, and I look forward to talking a little bit more about the Ohio Christian Education Network because I think a lot of our listeners probably don't know everything that you guys do. But Troy, you're one of the good ones. I love working with you at CCV, so thankful for not only what you do, but how you do it. David, great to have you on the show. Great to meet you here on the show. But how about you? What's been your journey, and how did you end up helping out with Imago Christian School?
So like Troy, I also went to public high school, Christian college, and really my goal in life was always to do theater in some way. And when I graduated from college, I spent a year doing missions work. We wrote our own show and drove around the country and performed at churches, took up offerings, and it funded time for us to live in Haiti for several months. And so I did some work at a school in Haiti, learned a lot of things that you would have to have more education to learn in America, learned how to weld, and we did quite a few things that would not have been allowed for us to do in America just because we wouldn't have been qualified. But down in Haiti, you can do whatever you want. So I spent a year down there, realized that was not God's calling on my life to live in Haiti, but really saw a good value in what was going on down there. Came back to America, and I worked at Huntington College for a couple years in their scene shop and production program for their plays. And then I decided I just wanted to get out and try acting. So I applied for Columbus Children's Theater, and I worked with them. We toured all over the state and did shows for schools. That was my job. We do 2 or 3 shows a day at different schools all across the state. And then I got a call from Worthington Christian, and they said, hey, we'd like to get a person on staff for theater here. And my best friend in college's dad was the superintendent. So they called me up and said, how about you come over here and see what you can do? And I've been doing that for a long time. And, theater is what got me into education. I loved working with the kids. I love watching them grow. I love watching them get it. And for the past 10 years or so, I've been working with my wife in the mornings. We run a homeschool, sort of one-room schoolhouse. You can sort of see it behind me here, where we have kids of all different grades learning together. And most of these kids are kids who just would have had a hard time in a typical classroom. And we give them a chance to learn at their own pace. We give them a chance to get up and walk around whenever they need to. And the amount of fidgets on some of the desks is unnerving. But we just want these kids to have a chance to learn and not be stifled by some of the things that stifle people in a classroom setting.
Yeah, thank you, David. We missed you a little bit there as the connection was breaking up, but I would say definitely connect on the homeschooling front. The fidgeting are 5 kids now. I mean, my wife's got the baby, but the other 3 kids are fidgeting all the time, so I certainly understand that. But it's a beautiful way that it gives kids kind of the space to learn kind of at their own pace and everything of that nature, and they certainly do in my household. But also connecting what you're talking about from Haiti. I've been to Port-au-Prince twice, and there's a depth of appreciation, understand for all the gifts that we have here in the United States of America. If you encounter the depth of poverty that some of the people have there in Haiti and their challenges. But well, we're going to circle back to you because I think your backgrounds, both of you guys, plays directly into Imago Christian. But Troy, before we dive into talking a little bit more about this new school, let's talk a little bit about your role as executive director of the Ohio Christian Education Network at the Center for Christian Virtue. Why does Ocean exist, and what exactly do you do?
Yeah. So the Ohio Christian Education Network is a network of 208 Catholic and evangelical schools across Ohio. And we do 3 primary things. The first is we provide public policy advocacy on their behalf. So we give our member schools a seat at the table when education policy decisions are being made. Prior to OSIN forming in 2018, we had nothing like that. And I was a head of school at the time, and I recognized that we were essentially shut out when education policy decisions were being made. And so I serve as a lobbyist on our member schools' behalf. The second thing we do is help new Christian and Catholic schools get started. So we have so far helped 15 schools across the state get launched. And this coming fall, we expect up to 20 new schools joining those. And so really targeting underserved areas, particularly urban areas and rural areas that are largely underserved by faith-based schools. The last thing we do is run a scholarship granting organization. Over the 4 years of our existence, we've given out over $9 million in scholarships. This past year alone was over $4 million. And this coming school year, we hope to generate enough revenue to give over $7.5 million in scholarships to students who attend our member schools.
That's incredible. Let's just want to follow up question on that. What's the why behind what you do? I mean, why do you feel like it's so very important that we start these new Christian schools? I mean, what's going on right now in our public school system, for example, in Ohio?
Yeah, well, as many of your listeners, I'm sure know, we're in an educational crisis, not just in Ohio, but across the country. And that crisis is on multiple fronts. The crisis just at a baseline level. Our students are not even learning to read as they should. The most recent National Assessment for Educational Progress test scores, which came out in 2023, show that 2/3 of American 8th graders, of Ohio 8th graders, I should say, but the U.S. stats are very similar. 2/3 of Ohio 8th graders are not proficient at reading, and 3/4 of them are not proficient at math. There's something fundamentally and structurally wrong with our public education system. And then you layer on top of that the even more deadly aspects of some of the progressive ideologies that are teaching kids, the ideology that you talked about in your intro, that they're born in the wrong body, that they have these epistemological or ontological questions about who they are as a person. Christians need to be responding to these incredible opportunities and needs in our educational system by providing students with an education, a framework for understanding the world that is based in the person of Jesus Christ. And that's why we are so committed to the idea of Christian education for every student in Ohio. We believe every student will benefit from that kind of faith-based education.
I love it. And we have such a tremendous opportunity in both our Catholic and evangelical schools to help form saints for the next generation and remind them the purpose of education. It's not about, getting a good job so you can retire in Florida when you're 50, but it's about using your gifts and talents to advance the kingdom of God. And somewhere along the way, we lost that. I mean, even from our public education system, maybe it's when we took prayer out of schools, but nonetheless, I digress. That could be a whole nother show. David, tell us a little bit about the genesis for Imago Christian School and why a school like this in particular is needed today.
Yeah, we had a teacher on our staff a couple years ago who had a child that was going to be born with Down syndrome. We sort of knew it ahead of time, and that he was going to have a lot of problems on top of that, heart conditions, and he's nonverbal. He doesn't eat. There's lots of things. And he came to speak in chapel one day, and one of the things he said was, "I can't believe my kid will never have an opportunity to be in a school like this, because it's just so hard to staff a school at that size to take care of people with needs as diverse as they are out there." And so we started several years ago talking about what it would look like to start a school like this. And then, of course, COVID did what COVID did, and everybody sort of forgot what they were doing. And we came back to it about a year ago now and decided this is the right time in the life of funding and the right time in the life of how schools work to try to say, what can we do to make this an affordable opportunity for people with kids with any kind of disabilities or needs or fidgeting bodies to have a school that looks at how they learn and really tailors what they're doing to how the children learn. And we went with the name Imago because the Latin Imago Dei, the image of Christ. We believe all these kids are born in the image of Christ and deserve to know who he is. We were talking once about somebody had said, well, kids with Down syndrome, they probably can't even comprehend God. So, how do we try to teach them that? And the response was, the gap between us and a kid with Down syndrome is way smaller than the gap between us and God. And if we can try to conceive him, why can't they?
Amen. Well said. And my sister, who was a special ed teacher for many years, I remember her coming home and sharing plenty of stories and how much that experience for her drew her closer to understand and appreciate the love of God. So we get so much more in these situations when we're able to kind of reach out and help these individuals with, like you said, any learning disabilities that they might have. It's a tremendous opportunity for us to understand the heart of the Father. Troy, David mentioned Imago means image, and Imago Dei, the image and likeness of God from Genesis 1:27. The Judeo-Christian ideal or principle, it's especially as it developed, it was quite radical. Tell us a little bit more about this concept and how it's shaped kind of Western culture and why it's so important that, particularly with everything going on in the country today, we kind of return to this fundamental understanding that why we have value and worth is because we're made in the Almighty's image.
Yeah, so certainly when you look at what kind of influence has that concept had on Western culture, and it's massive, it's significant, right? The whole concept of human rights, human dignity, human value can only flow from the fact that we were created in the image of our Maker. There's no other system out there that provides any kind of basis or foundation for dignity, worth, and value than a biblical one that is framed in God's image. If they have it, it's because they've stolen it from the Christian worldview, and that happens quite a bit. It's not that a non-believer can't feel dignity or worth or assign dignity and worth to other people, but they're using a Christian concept in order to do it. And so because we hold deeply to this idea that each of these children, whether they have Down syndrome, whether they have a reading disability, if they're blind, if they're physically handicapped, each of these students has just as much value, worth, and dignity as a typical student has, as their teachers or staff members of the school have. And so we feel a calling as a Christian community to do something to provide them a proper Christian education. When I spent many years as a principal at Worthington Christian, and I did a lot of family admission interviews, and there were too many times when I had to look a family in the face and tell them that we couldn't enroll their child who had an atypical situation because we didn't have the means of serving them at our school. And it was heartbreaking because these families desperately wanted a Christian education for their child. They understood and they were completely aligned with us on the value, maybe even more committed to that idea than we essentially were, because we were the ones saying we can't do this. And that was always heartbreaking. And so that's what drove, as Dave was a colleague of mine at school, and this group was recognizing that we needed to do something to serve these children that God cares deeply about. God has a calling on their lives, and we want to help them discover that as part of their school. And so we felt like we had to answer that call, and we had to do something to provide them a means for the kind of education that we believe God's bringing them to.
Well, Troy and David, question for you both. What are the means that you need to serve students who have special needs? And why couldn't, say, normal Christian schools step in this gap? I mean, is it just a financial need that you guys have to be able to hire special ed teachers? Like, what do you actually need to start a school like this?
Well, one thing you need more than anything else is people with a desire to serve this way. I mean, this is a unique calling. My mother-in-law worked in special needs kids all of her life. She was such a wonderful human because she cared about these kids so much. She retired with so many sick days she had accumulated because she couldn't bear to not be there on a day to help these kids, because there's just not, a substitute teacher in a place like that is just not always that effective. And she couldn't take a day off from serving this way. And I think, if we can find some people who care about kids that are different, like the way my wife does, and the other members of our team do, that is going to be a trick for us, and something that we'll need help finding the right people who can fill those spots.
Yeah, certainly staffing is an issue. And I think the reality is that providing the kind of services that a lot of atypical students need is just very expensive. And so there are a lot of Catholic Christian schools who don't have either the professional staffing, as Dave mentioned, or they don't have the resources in terms of finances in order to pay for it. Because a lot of these students need 1-to-1, 2-to-1, maybe 4-to-1 at the most ratios. And that becomes very expensive because you're hiring personnel at a much higher rate than you would for a typical classroom of 20 or 25 students. And so the reality is that there are a lot of Christian schools who look at the financial commitment and say, we can't do it. That's why part of our commitment is to be able to provide these kind of services at a reasonable cost to families. And we're able, in Ohio, to be frank, we are incredibly blessed with the resources the General Assembly has provided to students that we're going to be serving through the John Peterson Scholarship or the Autism Scholarship, even the Ed Choice Scholarship Program. These are incredibly effective resources that families will be able to use to pay for tuition and services that our school is going to be able to provide, that a typical Christian school or Catholic school would not be able to do just because of the limits of financial resources. So we're blessed to be part of Ohio and the system that they have put into place. But that's what's going to allow us to provide the expensive resources that it's going to take to provide what these students need.
Well, we've been blessed.
And you may think, why hasn't this happened before? Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. You may think, why hasn't this happened before? This seems like a real need in the community. But like Troy said, some of these financial resources are just all coming together at the same time. That's going to make this possible for us to provide a school for kids and not make the parents have to have a third and fourth and fifth job to afford what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, on the other end of things, what does a student have to qualify for Imago Christian, if you will? So walk us through, a parent's maybe not sure if their student would qualify for this particular school.
Yeah, so I'll state, first of all, we won't open until fall of 2027. So our first school year will be the 27-28 school year. So we're about 18 months away from actually opening. But we will be interested in serving any student with a diagnosed learning difference of some sort. That could take any variety. It could be a student on a typical IEP that has a reading disability, cognitive disability, ADHD, autism, physical handicaps, we'll be serving a broad array of students. Now, we'll also have some what we call typical students in our school because we think it's great to have some combinations of both typical and sort of atypical students in the classroom, especially when families are often have students who need special services and other students that don't. So we want to allow families to not be separated in their schooling as well. So there'll be a small portion of our schools kind of reserved for those students that would be more typical. But we'll be located in the Columbus area. So I think geographic concerns are there as well. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to serve too many residents of Toledo with this, at least not initially. As the Lord blesses this and we're able to expand other parts of the state, we would certainly love to be able to do that because we know that there are students all across the state that are in need of this.
Well, David, we've got about a minute and a half left. How can folks engage in the work with Imago, and what do you need right now from listeners of this particular program?
Well, if you go to imagochristian.com, you can scroll down and there's ways to serve with us. There's a couple different things you can click on. Obviously prayer is a big thing. Obviously, if you are, getting ready to graduate with some degree in education and think this may be where I'm being called, get on there. There's ways to just connect with us and let us know who you are. And, we are on the verge of a location, but we're still not quite there. So finding the right place to be and the finances to do it. We really believe we've built a model that can sustain itself. We just need to get the doors open to start with.
Well, Troy, David.
I will add, if I can add to
ahead.
that, there are ways to donate on the website and also donate to the scholarship granting organization on behalf of Imago that gets you a tax credit. It's a gift at no cost. You find out more at imagochristian.com.
I love it. Troy, David, thank you guys so much for coming on today. Tremendously appreciate it. I actually just donated today because I love this model of school. And I hope to see this grow across the state of Ohio, maybe even to other states as well in the years to come. But God bless you in this mission. And may we all remember that each and every one of us, every person made in God's image and likeness with unbelievable, powerful worth and value. God bless everybody. Can't wait to talk to you next week on Say Yes to Life. In the meantime, go to imagochristian.com.